this conversation about style is fabulous. It's a nice little segue into my little piece of this. So as both Alicia and Dee talked about rolling out this new performance management process, they said, what are the skills that will support us doing this in a really effective way? And they said there were two, situational leadership and coaching, or both of them. And so I'm going to talk about situational leadership pretty quickly. I do want to say that both of these programs, both of these skill development opportunities exist at Razorfish University. So, so if you haven't gone through them, they are definitely offered. I think they're offered in self-paced WebEx form as well as a classroom environment. So take a peek at Razorfish University if you want more depth about this. But I'm going to cover both of these topics pretty quickly as they relate to the new performance management system. So, how many of you have actually been exposed to situational leadership? Yay! I'll probably rely on both of you guys. It's based on a premise that in order to be an effective leader, it's important that you are comfortable with more than just one style of leadership, that you're able to make distinctions or recognize when one style is appropriate over another, and that you can effectively flex and adapt your leadership style in order to adjust to the situation that's most appropriate. So we are going to do an assessment of your leadership style fairly quickly, and then I'll talk about the history of this assessment, and we'll look at 4 different leadership styles and talk about when each is appropriate. So I don't want to pre-frame you. Research says that if you answer each of these 12 situations based on your kind of initial reaction or gut reaction, it will be most accurate. So don't give it a lot of thought, but look at each one of these 12 situations, choose the response that you think is most appropriate. We short one?
Just one more.
And then we'll score it and talk about it. So I want to talk a little bit about this instrument, sort of where it came from before we do the interpretation. Up until probably the middle part of the last century, were some very widely held, strongly held beliefs about leadership style and the style that was the most appropriate. So if you think about what we believe to be true about leadership up until like the 1950s, 1960s, how would you describe it?
About the prevailing style of leadership?
Yeah.
More authoritarian.
Definitely authoritarian.
Command and
Micro.
control.
Command and control.
Micromanagement.
Micromanagement, yeah. Very task-oriented. Information flowed one way. Which way?
Down.
Down, top down. Decisions were made how?
Top.
At the top, right? And it was just the way things were done, right? People were seen largely as extensions of the machines that they operated because we were largely a manufacturing environment. And in 1968, there were a group of ergonomic researchers that were evaluating the effects of productivity on the effects of lighting on productivity in the workforce. And so they actually were doing this research in a pajama factory. And they went into one wing of this pajama factory and they increased the lighting, and then they stepped back and evaluated productivity for the next 30 days. And what do you think happened? Not only did productivity increase, but it literally shot through the roof. I think the increase was over 400%. They were so astounded, and rather than just replacing all of the lighting, what they decided to do was to test their theory. So they went into another wing of this pajama factory and they decreased the lighting pretty significantly. What do you think happened? Sorry?
Decreased.
Shot through the roof. So they're astounded and confused, and they said, if we're increasing lighting and productivity increases, and we're decreasing lighting and productivity increases, what sense do we make of this, right? And what do you think? What do you think they determine?
People like change, yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a mentor who told me one time, he said the only person that likes change is a wet baby, right? Most of us don't like it. And if you look at change statistics, typically the people who embrace change are the people who have been around for the least amount of time, right? The folks that have been around the longest tend to hold on white-knuckled and resist any kind of change. So it wasn't necessarily the change as much as it was the interpretation or the meaning that these factory workers gave the change. Any ideas what that might be?
Just the need to problem solve.
Problem
And
solving?
work together in conversation. There's a change in the environment, there's a change in the conversation.
Ah, yeah. Actually, probably the biggest thing that happened was up until the 60s, the dominant style of leadership was much more directive. As a result of this study, people said, management must care about us as people. They must see us as something other than machines, right? So this whole body of research around relational leadership came into play. And this model is based on some of the early research. So we're looking at two dimensions. We're looking at our orientation toward task, or getting stuff done, which is directive leadership, or our orientation toward relationship, or supportive leadership. And out of those two dimensions, 4 styles emerge. So now for your scoring. If your highest score was in column 1, your dominant style of leadership would be directive. So the numbers correspond in this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if your highest score was in column 2, your dominant leadership style is coaching. If your highest score was in column 3, supporting, and if your highest score was in column 4, it would be delegating. So I'm curious here, do you think there are, just as you read through the descriptions of each one of these styles, do you think there's a dominant leadership style here at Razorfish?
I feel I've run into a lot of coaching type people.
Yeah.
That's my personal experience.
It definitely, in my experience, is above the line. So it's coaching and supporting. I don't see a lot below the line. Now, one of the things about situational leadership is that the fundamental premise is that there isn't a right style, but there's a right style for certain situations. So let's talk about that. When is a directing style of leadership absolutely the best choice? When do you want to do that?
When things are falling apart.
When the spit hits the fan, for sure, right? Or when you're in a time crunch or a deadline, or when you're radically introducing new systems or processes. Oftentimes during an acquisition, we get more directive because we have to tell people what to do. When else is directing perfect?
I think it's really nice at the beginning of any kind of situation. So you set the tone and the framework for something before you let the team go.
Yeah. I like to think of directing as the style of leadership that builds competence, right? You want to make sure that people are skilled about the mechanics of the task, and once they have competence, you can begin to build competence, which is much more of a coaching style of leadership. So when does coaching make the best sense? When is that style perfect?
When you already have a group of high performers that has a pretty good skill set to begin with.
Yeah.
Just trying to maximize.
I would put high performers more as needing this style of leadership. These folks are
Still
I
learning.
Newer, yeah.
Yeah. And so we talked about supporting when you've got highly skilled, highly competent people. So in directing, we're building task skill. In coaching, we're building confidence. In supporting, we've got folks that are pretty skilled, pretty competent, pretty capable. They need less direction, less hands-on supervision, less feedback. They need to know you're there and available if they have questions, but your level of involvement is definitely reduced. So when does delegating make sense? When is that the perfect style?
When you have a team that you really trust and are familiar with the process and what needs to be done.
Highly skilled, highly competent, highly capable, they know what needs to be done. They need to know that you're there, but the level of supervision that you give them, you've really turned over not just responsibility, but authority, right? So you've effectively turned it over to them. Does this make sense? Okay, so the first thing is, what's your natural style of leadership? The second thing is, what about the needs of the people that work for you? So we're going to talk about that next. Take one, if you would. I know some of you may manage multiple people. Some of you may not manage so many people, if any. If you don't have a large number of direct reports or any direct reports, fill this out for 2 or 3 people that you work with on a regular basis. Those of you that do have big teams, I'm going to suggest that you just choose 3 people, 3 members of your team, and if you can, choose a variance of folks, a variance of skills, just to get a sense of the instrument. So put the team members' names at the top, and then rate each team member against this criteria on a scale of 1 to 8. So the numbers correlate in the following way. If the sum of your rating for one of your team members was 0 to 16, they would be considered an enthusiastic beginner, and the style of leadership that would be most appropriate for them would be directing. 16 to 32 is coaching. They'd be considered developing learners. 32 to 48, capable but cautious performers. And 48 to 64, self-reliant achievers. So really these 2 instruments are designed to look at your natural proclivity for leadership, what you do when you're just in your most comfortable mode, as well as the needs of the people that work for you. And for those of you, I'm surprised we were in Chicago last week and there were a number of people that came to this performance management workshop that have a one-to-one reporting relationship. In other words, they only have 1 direct report. I see lots of you with multiple people, and the challenge, I'm guessing, could be that you may have people in every one of these quadrants, right? So you have to really increase your level of flexibility and adaptability. I will tell you in your first assessment, if there is, oh, we didn't score it, did we? We didn't score your first, yes we did. So everyone here knows your dominant leadership style. If there's a 3 or more point variance between your dominant leadership style and your second leadership style, that indicates a fairly strong preference. So if you have a 0 for yourself in delegating or directing, those are styles you're just not that comfortable with. So what we're really trying to do and asking you to think about here as you get ready for your performance conversations is to think about the level of flexibility required for you in your natural leadership style and the needs of the people. So what I'd like you to do is pair up with someone in this room and answer the 4 questions. These questions, by the way, are framed up in the last page of this handout. So what's your preferred leadership style? What do you do naturally? What are the predominant needs of the people that work for you? Are there challenges or frustrations that exist as a result? I know one of the things that I see frequently here at Razorfish is you guys have a fairly dominant coaching culture, and yet because you hire wicked, smart, competent, capable people, and you put them through a learning curve fairly quickly, you probably rated at least some of them as needing more delegating and less coaching. So you might be over-managing, but it's that level of conversation that I would encourage. So I know some of you may not be finished with your conversation. I also know that you blocked out a 2-hour time window here. We actually blocked this room and HR's availability for an extra hour in case you want to prepare for any of your performance conversations. But before you leave, there is one more thing that we definitely want to do, and that is to talk about the ways in which HR can support you in this process.
So there are a number of different resources listed on this slide. We won't go through all of them. I'll let Candace chime in and talk about a few under craft and career that tie directly to her L&D workings.
Yeah, so over in Craft, Razorfish University, that's a term that has a couple of meanings. Sometimes it's used as a different name for the learning and development group within HR. And it's also a website, razorfishuniversity.com, which holds a lot of on-demand training, videos, and also there's a tab at the top that says Workshop Catalog. That's a full list of every workshop that we've hosted in the past couple of years at Razorfish. Not that it's an all-inclusive list, new things could be added to it. But the format we're using for live trainings this year is on demand by team or group request with buy-in with an executive sponsor who's guaranteeing that the team is going to have the time to come and they're going to come. So if ever there's something that strikes your fancy on that list that would be a need for your team, please reach out to me. And a lot of times there might be another team in the same office with a similar need. We book a vendor and we set up a day of training. Tuition reimbursement. Each non-contractor Razorfish employee has up to $5,500 a year for tuition reimbursement. And whereas we try not to use that for training that is needed for a specific need in your job, it's a lot of times it does relate to your job, but it doesn't necessarily have to. A good example is foreign language is completely covered. Degree programs are covered that don't necessarily relate directly to your job here at Razorfish. And then flipping over to career, the first bullet, Career Labs next week, where we have a lot of national and local events, and one of which is a Your Career at Razorfish web class, which we are framing as a good starter for the employee who might feel a little lost about how to fill out their form, where to start in writing their answers to the 4 questions. It's a good assessment of your values as an employee and what you're looking for in your position and what will make you feel most comfortable in your job. So look for lots of Career Lab announcements and attend as you can.
So there's a lot on this slide. The overall point of this slide is to let you know that you're not alone in this, and that every situation with every individual employee is going to be unique, and there are tools and there are resources to help you through every challenge. So know that you can reach out to myself, you can reach out to Ariane from an HR perspective, you have Candace here from a learning and development perspective. There's tons of online stuff. If you don't want to talk to any of us, you can do it on your own. And that's
Why would
okay
they
too.
not want to?
Yeah.
Come on.
But know that there are these tools that will help you through this, because we don't want this process to be a daunting one. As Alicia said early, it's meant to be a thoughtful process. And we do realize and recognize that this is a kind of a cultural and behavioral shift for our population. But we want to encourage that constant dialogue between employees and managers, and that's kind of new for Razorfish. And so this is a lot, but when you break it down to just the 4 questions and the 4 times a year, and you think through like all of the things that we've kind of laid out to help facilitate those things for you, it shouldn't be too cumbersome, and it makes all of you better managers and helps increase productivity, retention, all of those great things too.
I think the other thing is it's your job as managers to help employees understand that these tools and resources are also available to them, right? So I don't know what the utilization rate is as an example for tuition reimbursement, but I've been in a number of different sessions with employees who say, "What? We have that?"
Yeah.
And they just don't even know that it's available. So it's your job to kind of promote these resources to employees as well.
Yeah, and of course, everyone knows that every employee is allotted, every billable employee has 40 hours to devote to training, learning, and development each year. So that's 40 hours, a week's worth of time that they can go to trainings or, you know, whatever it may be, that won't negatively affect their utilization. And so that's huge too, and because oftentimes employees get so busy that they're like, oh, I can't leave my desk. And sometimes it's also like, well, my manager's not leaving their desk, so I probably shouldn't either. So really kind of set the standard and set the example. You know, participate in these things yourself and encourage those that you manage to do so.
Yep. These are just some screenshots of some of the tools and resources on the Razorfish University portal that if you don't know it's there.
They don't know what's there.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty snazzy website. It's nothing
It's
like
pretty
the fish
snazzy.
Yeah.
It's pretty broad as well as deep. It's very impressive. So, there you go. That's it.